It started with a knock at the door, sharp, deliberate, and far too early for a friendly visit. Through the peephole, I saw two uniformed officers, and behind them, the smug grin of our HOA president. They weren't here for me. They were here for my wife. The accusation. A serious violation that could cost us thousands. But what the HOA didn't know was that my wife wasn't just any homeowner. She was the one person in this county they should never have tried to intimidate. By the time they found out, it was already too late. Our neighborhood looked perfect from the outside: manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, and a quiet cul-de-sac where kids rode bikes until sunset. We'd moved here for the peace, the safety, and yes, the promise that the HOA would keep things in order. For the first year, it was exactly that. We paid our dues, waved to neighbors, and kept our property in pristine condition. My wife, Karen, loved tending to her flower beds, and I spent weekends fixing up the porch. We weren't troublemakers. We weren't rule breakers. But in communities like this, trouble doesn't always come from the people you expect. HOA president, a man named Gerald, had a reputation. He was the kind of person who measured grass height with a ruler and sent warning letters if your trash can lingered on the curb for more than an hour. We'd heard stories: small fines for unauthorized holiday decorations, threats over paint colors that were one shade off the approved palette. Still, we kept our heads down. One afternoon, Karen parked her county-issued SUV in our driveway after a long shift. It had the official sheriff's department emblem on the side, nothing flashy, just standard issue. The next morning, a letter appeared in our mailbox. It was from the HOA. And it wasn't friendly. The letter claimed Karen's vehicle was a commercial vehicle, and therefore prohibited from being parked in the driveway overnight. We were stunned. This was her work vehicle, the one she used to serve and protect the very community we lived in. We thought it had to be a mistake. Sarah called Gerald directly, explaining that the SUV was county property and exempt from such rules. But Gerald wasn't interested in explanations. He told her the rules were the rules, and if she didn't comply, fines would start immediately. First, we tried to reason with him. We sent documentation, county policy statements, even a letter from her department confirming the vehicle's status. Gerald ignored it all. Within a week, we received our first fine, $250. Then another. And another. It became clear this wasn't about the vehicle. It was about control. Gerald had decided to make an example out of us. Neighbors began whispering. Some avoided eye contact. Others quietly admitted they'd been targeted too, but were too afraid to push back. The harassment escalated. We started getting random inspections, HOA board members walking around our property with clipboards, taking photos of our fence, our mailbox, even the flowers Karen planted. One day, we came home to find a notice taped to our door. Final warning: remove vehicle or face legal action. Karen was furious, but I could see the toll it was taking on her. She'd dedicated her career to protecting people, and now she was being treated like a criminal in her own neighborhood. We decided enough was enough. We filed a formal appeal with the HOA, citing state law and county exemptions. The board scheduled a hearing, but when we arrived, it was clear the decision had already been made. Gerald smirked through the entire meeting, cutting Sarah off whenever she spoke. They upheld the fines and gave us 72 hours to comply. That's when Gerald made his biggest mistake. The next morning, 2 police officers showed up at our door, responding to a complaint from the HOA about a potentially unauthorized vehicle on private property. Gerald stood behind them, arms crossed, clearly expecting us to panic. Karen stepped outside before I could say a word. Calm. Professional. She greeted the officers by name, because she'd worked alongside them for years. Then, without raising her voice, she pulled out her badge. The look on Gerald's face was priceless. Officers quickly realized the situation was nothing more than an HOA power play. One of them even apologized to Karen for being dragged into it. But Karen wasn't done. She explained, in front of everyone, that her vehicle was legally authorized to be parked anywhere in the county, including her own driveway. She cited the exact statute, the county exemption, and the penalties for filing false reports to law enforcement. Gerald's smug expression vanished. The officers turned to him, asking if he understood the seriousness of making a false complaint. He stammered something about just enforcing HOA rules, but it was too late. The damage was done, and not to us. Neighbors had gathered on their lawns, watching the scene unfold. They saw the HOA president get publicly corrected, his authority crumbling in real time. Kern ended the conversation with one final line. "Next time you have a problem, Gerald, call me directly. You know my number." Week, the fines were dropped. The HOA quietly updated its bylaws to exempt law enforcement vehicles, though they never admitted they'd been wrong. Gerald avoided us after that, his once constant patrols of the neighborhood noticeably less frequent. Real impact went beyond our driveway. Neighbors who'd been too afraid to speak up started sharing their own stories. A small group of us began attending HOA meetings, asking questions, demanding transparency. The board, once a rubber stamp for Gerald's decisions, started pushing back. Sarah never sought revenge, she didn't need to. The truth had been enough. And in a community where fear had kept people silent, her stand gave others the courage to push back too. Looking back, I realized this was never just about a vehicle. It was about power, who has it, and what happens when someone abuses it. The HOA thought they could intimidate us. Instead, they exposed themselves.